She raised him like her own, gave him everything, and he repaid her by kicking her to the curb. It was a Thursday, late afternoon, the kind of day where the sun doesn't know if it wants to shine or call it quits early. Evelyn stood on the front porch in her house slippers, holding a reusable grocery bag with a loaf of bread, a few cans of beans, and a rotisserie chicken still warm through the plastic. She pressed her hip against the front door, her door, and realized something wasn't right. The key didn't fit. She tried it again, turned it slow, then fast, flipped it upside down like maybe she just wasn't thinking straight. But it wasn't her hand that was wrong. It was the lock. The deadbolt had been changed. She knocked once, then twice, then louder with the side of her fist, still holding the grocery bag, still wearing her soft blue cardigan that smelled faintly of lavender, still standing where she had stood for 22 years. Then the door opened, just a crack. Ryan's girlfriend, Natalie, peeked through the gap, her eyebrows raised like she wasn't expecting company. "Oh, hey, you weren't supposed to be back until later." Evelyn blinked. "Why can't I get in the house?" Natalie hesitated. She looked back over her shoulder, then stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. "I think Ryan was going to talk to you about that." "Talk to me about what? You don't live here anymore." Silence fell like a brick. Evelyn held her grocery bag tighter, suddenly unsure what to do with her hands. Her chest tightened. "What did you just say?" Natalie gave a nervous little smile, the kind people use when they're pretending everything's normal. "Look, it's just paperwork stuff. Nothing personal. Ryan said you agreed to transfer the deed." "I what?" "He said you signed a few weeks ago. Remember all those documents at the kitchen table?" Evelyn stared, and slowly it started to click. The forms, the way Ryan brushed off her questions, told her it was just housekeeping, that they needed to get things in order, that it would protect the house if anything happened to her. She had trusted him. She had trusted her son. And now her hands were trembling. Natalie didn't wait for more questions. She slipped back inside, muttering something about giving Ryan a call. The door shut again, locked again. Evelyn stood there for a full minute, then 5, then 10. Nobody opened the door again, and she didn't knock. She walked down the steps slowly, that chicken still tucked under her arm like a baby. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she wasn't going back inside. But Ryan hadn't just taken her house. He had taken something deeper. And Evelyn was about to remember exactly who she was. Long before any of this, before the paperwork, before Natalie, before her front porch became foreign, Evelyn had been more than just a woman in a house. She had been a mother, and not just to anybody, but to a child nobody else wanted. Back in 1996, Evelyn was working the night shift at St. Joseph's Hospital in Jackson, Mississippi. She was a floor nurse. Tough, reliable, soft-spoken, a woman who had long since made peace with not having children of her own after 2 miscarriages and a failed round of IVF. The grief was a scar, invisible but deep. And then one night, she met Ryan. He'd come in with a broken wrist, barely 2 years old, pale, underfed, wearing a t-shirt 3 sizes too big with mustard stains on the collar. His foster mother didn't even stay at the hospital. She dropped him off with child services and left. Evelyn didn't go looking to adopt, but sometimes God doesn't knock. Sometimes he just sits a baby in your arms and dares you to put him down. Ryan was silent for the first few days, just clung to her scrubs like a vine, wouldn't speak to anyone, wouldn't eat unless she fed him. Something about her made him feel safe. And that was enough. 2 months later, she filed the first set of papers. 6 months after that, he had her last name. Her friends thought she was crazy, a single black woman in her late 30s adopting a white toddler with behavioral issues. "Girl, you trying to save the whole system?" "No," she'd reply, "just this one." Evelyn gave Ryan everything she never had. A bedroom with a race car bed, packed lunches with his name in marker, swimming lessons, piano lessons, Saturday trips to the zoo. He had asthma, so she found the best pediatrician. He had trouble reading, so she hired a tutor. She taught him how to braid hair using his action figures so he'd know how to care for a future daughter someday. She made him write thank you notes after Christmas, and she never once missed a parent-teacher conference. But not everything was perfect. As Ryan grew older, things changed. By middle school, he started asking questions. Why do I look different from you? Why do people stare at us in the store? Why does everybody think I'm adopted? She always answered with the same words. Because you are, but that doesn't mean you're not mine. He never fully accepted it. In high school, he grew distant. By college, he barely came home, and when he did, it was always quick. An overnight visit, a dinner, hey, mama, before rushing out with his phone in his hand. But Evelyn never complained. She kept the lights on, kept his old room just the way he left it, kept believing that love, even quiet love, was enough. Then her husband passed, and suddenly Ryan started coming around more. He was helpful at first, cleaning gutters, mowing the lawn, reminding her to take her blood pressure pills. He'd bring Natalie sometimes, and they'd sit on the porch while Evelyn made cornbread and watched Jeopardy. She thought things were healing. But what she didn't know was that Ryan hadn't come home to rebuild, he came to take inventory. And by the time she realized it, her name was off the deed and her trust had been sold for scraps. But a mother doesn't forget. And Evelyn was already remembering every sacrifice she ever made. Evelyn spent that night in her car. She parked it 2 blocks down from the house. Well, what used to be her house, in front of a row of duplexes with peeling paint and plastic chairs on the porches. She didn't cry, not once, but her hands stayed locked at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, even after the engine was off. The rotisserie chicken sat untouched in the passenger seat, cold now, grease soaking through the plastic. She stared out the windshield, her eyes fixed on nothing. Grief has a way of sitting heavy in your lungs, not just from losing people, but from realizing who they never were to begin with. When her husband, Leonard, passed 3 years earlier from a misdiagnosed blood clot, Evelyn thought the pain couldn't cut deeper. He had been her balance, a man of few words, all weight. They met at church, fell in love over fried catfish and Bible verses, and spent 29 years building a home that rested on faith and forgiveness. But this pain, this betrayal, had a different sting. The next morning, Evelyn went to the bank to check her account, part habit, part necessity. It was almost funny. The balance hadn't changed, because Ryan never touched that money, because Ryan never even knew it existed. After Leonard died, the hospital had tried to avoid blame, calling it a natural complication. But Evelyn had been a nurse too long not to recognize the pattern. She pressed, filed complaints, consulted with an old attorney friend, and 2 years later won a malpractice lawsuit that no one thought she could, $9.5 million. She didn't tell a soul, not even Ryan. She moved it into a separate trust under her maiden name, split across a handful of accounts. It wasn't out of paranoia. It was peace of mind, a secret, sacred thing. Because money changes people, and some things are better left under the radar. That day, sitting in the bank lobby with her ankles swollen and her spirit cracked in 2, Evelyn realized something else. Ryan hadn't just betrayed her trust, he had underestimated her. She may not have had the house anymore, but she had resources. She had knowledge, and she still had one weapon Ryan had never learned how to use: patience. So she booked a motel room in Meridian, paid in cash, 2 nights, no questions. She needed a plan, but more than that, she needed to sit still and remember who the hell she was. She flipped through an old notebook she kept in her purse, full of prayers, phone numbers, and handwritten reminders to call her cousin in Lafayette. At the back of it was a note she'd scribbled years ago, the day the court settlement came through: don't let money make you loud. Let it make you quiet. Let it buy you time. She smiled at the page. Ryan thought he had kicked her out, but he had no idea he'd just set her free. But freedom doesn't mean comfort, not yet, and Evelyn still had some fires to walk through before she rose again. The first time Ryan put a stack of papers in front of her, it was a Sunday. Evelyn was sitting at the kitchen table folding dish towels while the oven ticked away at a sweet potato pie. Her knees ached that day. Rain was coming, she could feel it in her bones, but she smiled through it. Ryan had stopped by without calling first, and even though she didn't like surprises, she told herself maybe he missed her. He walked in wearing one of those slim-fitted dress shirts that looked like it belonged to someone else's body. Natalie followed behind him, barely looking up from her phone. "Hey, Mama," he said, giving her a half hug. "We brought some papers. Nothing serious, just stuff to help with taxes and the house." Cleaning things up on the back end, you know. Evelyn furrowed her brow. What kind of papers? Ryan pulled out a folder like a magician with a deck of cards. Trust paperwork, real estate transfer, some power of attorney language. We had it reviewed. Natalie's firm does this kind of stuff all the time. Totally standard. Natalie chimed in from behind her screen, not looking up. It's just a way to protect your assets, Miss Carter. Avoid probate. You'd still be covered for everything. I didn't ask to avoid anything, Evelyn said quietly, her hands resting on the unfolded towel. Ryan chuckled. I know. That's why we're doing it for you. Look, if something happens to you, I mean, God forbid, it would be a mess to untangle the house with your name on all the documents. This just makes sure things stay in the family. Evelyn stared at the paper. The letters swam a little. She didn't wear her reading glasses often, hated how they pinched the sides of her nose. Ryan noticed. Here, he said, handing her a pen. I highlighted the signature lines. You don't need to worry about the rest. I already went over it with them. She hesitated. She wanted to say something. Something like, I should probably have someone look at this, or, why do you need power of attorney now? But Ryan was her baby, her little boy who used to cry when she walked past his crib, the one who needed an inhaler every time he got too excited, the one she stayed up with all night when he got chickenpox at 6 and refused to sleep without holding her hand. So she signed page after page. He even joked as she scribbled her name, You're making history, Mama. She laughed once, just a puff of air. The pie timer went off, and she got up to turn the oven off. That moment stuck in her mind for weeks after. The smell of cinnamon and burnt sugar, the sound of the pen cap clicking shut, the smile on Natalie's face that felt just a little too satisfied. She didn't know it then, but that afternoon was the last time she'd ever sit at that kitchen table. The next visits were shorter. Ryan started showing up with bank statements and investor friends she didn't care to meet. He was always busy, always talking about flipping properties, building portfolios, how her home was equity waiting to be unlocked. He started calling her Evelyn in front of Natalie. That was new. And one day, while she was watering the begonias in the front yard, she overheard Natalie say, once we close on this place, we can finally get that apartment in Dallas. That's when Evelyn started packing a small bag, just in case. She tucked away her Bible, her passport, the last photo she had of Leonard, and her notebook with the banking information for the settlement she had never told Ryan about. Her body didn't move as fast anymore, but her mind was still sharp enough to know when love had curdled. But Evelyn hadn't come this far just to watch everything she built disappear, not without reminding Ryan whose name he'd signed away. The day Ryan called her a guest in her own home, Evelyn didn't say a word. It was a Wednesday, sometime after lunch. She had just finished vacuuming the living room, a chore she still liked to do herself, even though her niece teased her for it. Dust didn't care about age, and Evelyn believed in a clean house no matter who was watching. Ryan walked in, sunglasses still on, earbuds hanging around his neck. Natalie trailed behind, mid-conversation with someone over Bluetooth. They didn't speak at first, just walked right past her like she was the cleaning lady. Then Ryan paused, turned around, and said casually, Hey, next time you use the Dyson, can you empty it out? We've got people coming to see the place this weekend. Evelyn blinked. People, realtors. Just to get a feel for the value, you know. Market research. She stared at him. You selling the house? He chuckled like she had asked if he was moving to the moon. Not yet. Just thinking ahead. Got to explore all our options, right? She stood straight. Our options. That's when he said it. You're a guest now, Mama. It's still your space, of course, but legally, well, you know how it is. Her hand tightened around the vacuum handle. She didn't say anything, didn't scream, didn't cry, just nodded once. That night, she packed her small bag for real. She didn't take much. Just what she needed. The Bible, her notebook, 2 dresses, 1 pair of sneakers, and her wedding band, which she hadn't worn since Leonard passed but still kept in a little pouch by her bedside table. Ryan didn't ask where she was going. Natalie didn't care. They had what they wanted, or so they thought. Evelyn checked into a budget motel on the other side of town, near a truck stop and a gas station that always had flickering lights. The bed creaked when she sat down, and the heater wheezed like it had asthma, but it was hers, and it was quiet. She sat at the tiny desk and opened her notebook. There was a number she had kept in there for 14 years, belonging to a woman named Doris, who used to work at a nonprofit that helped older women navigate housing law. Doris had helped her once when a tenant in her rental property tried to sue her over a plumbing issue. She dialed the number. It rang once, then twice, then disconnected. She sighed. Then she remembered C.J. Clarence, C.J. Bell, Leonard's friend from the old neighborhood, a lawyer, long retired, but sharper than a whip and twice as stubborn. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but she picked up the phone anyway. It rang 6 times before a tired, raspy voice answered. "This better be Jesus or trouble." Evelyn smiled. "Maybe it's both." "Evie." "Yeah, it's me. I need to talk to you." CJ didn't need much convincing, because real friends remember when someone shows up with a casserole after your surgery, and he'd been waiting for a call like this. CJ met her at a diner just off I-20 the next morning, the kind of place that still served coffee in heavy ceramic mugs and called everyone, "hun," whether they were 5 or 85. He looked older than she remembered, white in his beard now, eyes a little glassier, but he still had that same thick brow and dry humor that made people think twice before lying to his face. "You look like hell," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. Evelyn smiled. "Good morning to you, too." He took a sip of his coffee, black, no sugar, no cream, just like Leonard used to drink it. "All right," CJ said, setting the cup down. "Tell me everything. Don't skip, don't soften. Just lay it out." So she did. She told him about the forms Ryan made her sign, the way he changed the locks, the guest comment, Natalie, the realtors, the fake smiles. CJ listened without interrupting once. When she was done, he leaned back and let out a long sigh. "He tricked you, played you. But he made one big mistake." "What's that?" "He forgot who raised him." Evelyn looked down at her napkin. "I signed the deed over, CJ. "Yeah, but signing under false pretenses doesn't mean it's legal, especially if you weren't fully informed or he misrepresented the documents." She raised an eyebrow. "You think we can take him to court?" CJ grinned. "Evie, I could take him to court in my sleep." She laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "I'm tired, CJ. I'm not trying to destroy him. I want my home, and I want to look at myself again and not feel like a damn fool." CJ nodded slowly. "Then let's not destroy him. Let's teach him something." They spent the next 2 hours going over everything. What she signed, what dates she remembered, the conversations she could recall. Evelyn had written most of it down in her notebook anyway, even before she thought she'd need it. Habit of an old nurse. Document everything. CJ told her what to expect next, what kind of lawyer he'd connect her with, how they'd file a petition to investigate whether the transfer was fraudulent, and what to do if it escalated to court. Then Evelyn said something she hadn't told anyone else. "I've got money, CJ." He blinked. "You mean a little saved up?" "No, I mean real money. Settlement money from the hospital. $9.5 million. CJ nearly dropped his mug. "Jesus, I never touched it. Didn't want Ryan knowing. Didn't want anyone knowing, really." CJ shook his head slowly. "You've been sitting on $9 million and letting this boy run circles around you." "I didn't want money to change the way I loved him," she said, barely above a whisper. CJ didn't answer right away, just stared at her, then reached across the table and touched her hand. "It didn't," he said. "He changed all on his own." Evelyn looked out the window at the highway in the distance. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she felt. Worn, not defeated, but cracked, like something that had been dropped but refused to break. She turned back to CJ. "I want to do this right. No drama, no cameras. Just my name back on my door." CJ nodded. "We'll get it." But there was one last conversation Evelyn needed to have before the lawyers, before the hearings, one final attempt to speak not to the man Ryan had become, but to the boy she remembered. Evelyn didn't call first. She knew if she did, he'd either hang up or have Natalie talk for him. So she just showed up. It was late afternoon when she pulled into the driveway. The yard looked too neat, like someone had trimmed the hedges just enough to impress a stranger but not enough to show real care. Her begonias were gone. She knocked once. Ryan answered in gym shorts and a branded hoodie, holding a protein shake. His face tightened the second he saw her. "Ma, Evelyn, what are you doing here?" Evelyn stepped forward just enough that the screen door separated them. "I don't need much of your time. I just came to say something." He looked back over his shoulder, probably checking if Natalie was home, then sighed and stepped onto the porch. "Look, if this is about the house." She raised a hand. "Let me finish." He shut his mouth. "I raised you when nobody else would. Not because I had to, and not because I wanted thanks. I did it because I saw a child who needed love, and I gave it every ounce I had." She took a breath, her throat tight. "I watched you grow. I gave up vacations, sleep, time, my body. I gave it all to you. And I never once made you feel like a guest in this life." Her voice steadied. "And you repaid me with a signature and a changed lock." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You signed, Ma. It wasn't like I forced. Don't call me Ma if you don't mean it." Silence. She straightened her shoulders. "I'm not here to argue, just to tell you I know what you did. And you should know, I'm not broke. Never was. I've got enough money to buy this house 10 times over." Ryan's face changed. First disbelief, then panic, then something like shame. "I didn't know that. You weren't supposed to," she said. "Because love ain't a business, and loyalty can't be bought. But now I know, and so do you." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. This will go where it needs to go. I just wanted to look you in the eye one last time before it does." Ryan's hand dropped to his side. "You're going to sue me?" "No," she said. "I'm going to remind you what a real home costs." And with that, she turned and walked back to her car. No yelling, no begging, just a woman who finally remembered her worth. But lawsuits don't scare people like Evelyn. What scares them is seeing the person they underestimated rise stronger than ever. 3 months later, the house was empty. No furniture, no Natalie, no Ryan. The new owner, a retired schoolteacher from Lafayette, said the place felt heavy when she first walked in, like it had been through something. And it had. CJ had moved fast. The fraud petition passed through the court quicker than expected. The judge didn't even blink after reviewing the documents and testimony, ruling that Evelyn had clearly been misled and that the transfer had occurred under questionable, possibly manipulative circumstances. Ryan never showed up to the hearing. He'd already left the state. Natalie went back to Dallas without him. Evelyn didn't smile when she heard that. She didn't laugh. She just exhaled, long and slow, like something had been holding its breath inside her and could finally let go. She didn't move back in, though. Too many memories, too many ghosts of quiet betrayals and Sunday dinners that now felt like rehearsals for an exit. Instead, she took her money, her full, untouched inheritance, and did something no one expected. She bought 3 homes in Pascagoula, Mississippi, not big ones, not flashy, just enough. She turned them into safe housing for women over 60 who had been evicted, displaced, or abandoned by their families. She named the little program Len's Place, after her late husband, saying it was the kind of thing he would have done if he'd lived long enough to retire. The first resident was a woman named Alma, 74 years old, kicked out by her grandson when she couldn't babysit full-time anymore. The second was Darlene, whose own daughter sold her house while she was in rehab after hip surgery. Evelyn cooked Sunday meals for them all. Sometimes they watched game shows. Sometimes they just sat on the porch and swapped stories about who hurt them and who they survived. Evelyn never needed to explain her story. They saw it in the way she carried herself, calm, steady, unapologetic. CJ still visited now and then, especially when paperwork piled up. He joked about putting her on a billboard, the woman who turned betrayal into a blueprint. Evelyn would laugh and wave him off. "I just did what my mama taught me. You don't fold when you're cornered. You pray, you plant your feet, and you protect your peace." But Evelyn knew the fight wasn't about a house. It was about not letting a single act of betrayal define the life she'd built with her bare hands. 1 year later, Evelyn sat on the back porch of Len's Place with a cup of tea and a fleece blanket over her lap. The sky above Pascagoula was streaked with orange and gold, the kind of sunset that made silence feel like a hymn. Alma was upstairs crocheting. Darlene was in the kitchen humming to herself while she cleaned collard greens. And Evelyn, for the first time in a long while, felt still, not busy, not angry, not hurt, just still. A letter had come in the mail that morning, no return address, just her name written in handwriting she hadn't seen in almost a year. Inside was a note. I messed up. I see that now. I don't know why I did it the way I did. Maybe I thought I was owed something. Maybe I just never understood what you gave me. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to say it. You didn't deserve what I did. I hope you're okay. Ryan. Evelyn read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the back of her Bible, not because she planned to forget, but because some things are meant to be remembered without being relived. She didn't write him back. She didn't need to. Forgiveness, to her, wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about freeing herself from the grip of what he'd done. She knew something now that she hadn't known then. You can love someone fully, raise them right, give them your everything, and still lose them, not because of who you were, but because of who they chose to be. And that's not your shame to carry. Evelyn leaned back in her chair as the crickets began to tune up their evening song. She closed her eyes and breathed deep, the kind of breath that fills more than lungs. It filled memory, it filled meaning. A home wasn't just a roof. It was the people under it. And she had built a new one from scratch. No paperwork needed,